I'm Kay Denniston, and I'm going to show you today or demonstrate how to make cheese. I had a client come in and say, I'd like to learn to make cheese. I said, well, then let's learn. And then after she left, I thought, what was I thinking? So I will tell you, I have learned a lot in putting this lesson together, and I've had some fun in putting this lesson together. So I hope you have the same results. I hope you have some fun, and I hope you learn a little bit too. First thing that amazed me about making cheese, it takes 3 ingredients, just 3. Milk, some form of acid, and salt. Now the acid can be lemon juice like we're using today, or it can be white vinegar, or it can be the citric acid that you reconstitute into cool water, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But today we're using whole milk, okay? And I do need to clarify that anytime I talk about milk in this demonstration, I'm talking about dairy milk, milk that comes from an animal. I'm not talking about any of the plant source milks or the alternative milks. I'm not sure how those work with cheese making, but I do know that the only one thing I found information on was the dairy type milk. So we're going to be using whole milk. You can use skim milk. You can use other types of milk. Use sheep milk, goat milk, buffalo milk. Do you have any of that in the pantry? But we're going to be using whole milk. Now, most of the milk that you get from the grocery store is going to tell you that it's 3.25% fat. 3.25. There's a few out there that might be 3.5, but most of them are 3.25. So it's not really whole milk. It's not raw milk. But we are using pasteurized whole milk that we get at the grocery store. You don't need to use the ultra pasteurized. The ultra pasteurized has already been raised to a temperature to increase the shelf life of the milk. Organic milk, goat milk, sheep milk that we get at the grocery, it's not a very popular milk in this area. So most of that has been ultra pasteurized, and you'll have it's already taken the processed out that will make it turn to cheese. So let's stick with whole milk, skim milk, okay? And we're going to use whole milk, we're going to use lemon juice, and we're going to use salt. Because we're not aging our cheese, we can use plain old iodized salt. If we were aging the cheese, we'd have to use what's called cheese salt. So see, simple ingredients, simple equipment. I've got a pan to put it in, to heat it in. I'm using a skillet because I thought it'd be a little bit easier for you to see in the video. A source of heat. You're going to need some gauze. Okay, this is one thing you may not have, but it's easily obtained at a fabric store or at some of your discount stores. But I do not recommend gauze. The gauze is so open woven that the cheese will go through it and actually get caught in there, and you'll have trouble. The cheese and the gauze will become one. So stick with cheesecloth. What I have used here, and you can't see it, it is I ordered what's called a grade 90. It doesn't have, I was new at this, so I ordered some, and it works really well. So I'm glad I've got it. I got a full package, and that's what we're going to be using today, okay? You'll need a colander for you to strain your cheese, separate the cheese from the whey, and some container to collect the whey that comes through your cheese, okay? So the first thing we're going to do, let's get started. Let's heat the milk. I need to turn my heat on. And you say, how high are you going to turn it? Well, we're going to turn it as high as we can do it, as we can heat the milk without it scorching. We do not want to scorch the milk. If you scorch it, your cheese, you'll still have cheese, but it'll have a burnt flavor to it. Okay, we're using a half a gallon. And another piece of equipment that I forgot to tell you about is I'm going to be using a flat edge spatula. Can you see that? You can use a spoon or anything. I like the flat edge because the entire time that we're heating this milk, we're going to be stirring. And how are you going to know if it's scorching or if it's sticking to the bottom of the pan? Just periodically you lift up your spatula. If it's sticking to the edge, then you need to know, turn your heat down, okay? So all of this, we're going to be using our senses through making this cheese. And most cheese makers, when you ask for a recipe or you ask for specifics, they don't want to give it to you. So that kind of made me nervous in the beginning because I need specifics. I need a recipe. And you know what they say? A recipe is just a guide to get started. So I kind of understand where they're coming from after doing this a few times. So you just need to jump in and try. I'm going to stir this milk consistently, okay? I am not walking away from it. I want to bring it to a temperature of a little over 185 for the cheese we're making today. And I should have told you that in the beginning. We're making paneer cheese, Paneer. That is an Indian cheese. And the reason I chose to make paneer is because the same process that I'm showing you, you can make ricotta. So what the demonstration will show you how to make two different cheeses in one, okay? If we're making ricotta cheese, the difference will be when we add the acid. If we're making ricotta, when the temperature of the milk is 175, and yes, I am going to use the thermometer. Real cheese makers use their fingers. Kay's going to use a thermometer. But when the milk gets to the temperature of 175, we would add this acid, and that would make ricotta cheese. We're making paneer cheese. I don't know about you, I had never heard of paneer cheese, hadn't eaten paneer cheese, but it's kind of interesting to learn new things. The paneer won't melt, okay? I didn't know there was a cheese that wouldn't melt. See, FCS agents don't know everything, but we're constantly learning to find out more. The paneer cheese is actually, what you do is cut it into however you want it, slices, cubes, whatever, and cook it up in, you don't coat it or anything, just put it in an oil or butter, whatever. We're gonna try some here when we get finished. We're gonna do it with butter. But a lot of vegetarians use this paneer cheese as a substitute for chicken in some of their salads and recipes like that. So we don't want to rush our milk. We want it to continue to go up in temperature. But while we're waiting on it, let's talk a little bit about, mine took, I will tell you, most of the time mine takes about 20 minutes. Again, I told you I like specifics. I like recipes. I go by the rules, okay? I hesitate to tell you that though, because if you say, Kay said 20 minutes, it's not 20 minutes yet, so it's not time to, no, you've got to use your senses. You've got to use a thermometer or your finger, whichever you feel more comfortable with. And you need to watch the process. Hopefully, after seeing it demonstrated, you'll feel a little more comfortable with that. But when it gets to that point, what kind of pan? I was trying to think of the questions that were asked. What kind of pan should I use? Any pan will work. The thinner the pan, I shouldn't say any pan, but the thinner the pan, the more likely it is to scorch. And that's true with any cooking, okay? The thinner your pan, the sooner it's going to burn or scorch. You do not want to use aluminum pans with any acid. And I've already told you we're going to be adding acid here. So that's not just with cheese making. I would not use any aluminum pans for this process. Acid and aluminum do not get along. And if you don't know that, if you've ever made a lasagna or something like that that's got tomato paste and sauce in it, and if that aluminum foil touches the top of that, it will eat a hole in the aluminum. So let's stay away from the aluminum. I prefer the heavyweight stainless steel. I'm using this one here just because it's about the right size for you to, actually you can see into the pot and watch the process. What we're trying to do here, the whole process, is when you're making cheese, you're trying to thicken or cause the protein in the milk to coagulate and become solid or semi-solid, and you're trying to capture the fat in the milk to make it creamier. So needless to say, the more fat in the milk, the more creamy your cheese is going to be. I'm going to continue heating this Okay, we're going to do a little fast forward here. A question that has been asked too has, when do I put the salt in, or when do I put the seasoning in? Because you can season your cheese, okay? You can put basil, you can put thyme or rosemary. Anything that heat's going to bother you probably would want to stay away from, just because of the looks of it. But it's going to be, we don't do that until the very end, because we don't want to lose that flavoring. And when we go to drain the milk, the cheese from the whey, we don't want to leave behind our salt flavoring or any other flavoring that we may have chosen to add to our cheese. I am new to the cheese making process. And I was thinking when I first started this, this has been fun, but I will do this. At my house, there's just my husband and myself. And many times we buy milk, whole milk, and then it's never used, okay? I won't say it's never used, but a lot of it's not used. Now that I know about this process, I will probably, because all it takes is some acid and some salt, and I've got the equipment, I will probably make that milk up into cheese if I see we're not going to be using it in time. Now, I do want to caution you, it's like everything else that we preserve. You're only going to get the quality of the milk that you start with. So if the milk was bad, this isn't going to make it any better, okay? If it was sour, you'd have a sour flavor, even though a lot of people say, well, that's what you're doing. You're souring the milk when you add the acid. It's not the same chemical process. And this is chemistry. This is such a science project of watching what happens here when we do start to add the acid. So we're going to have cheese, and then we can just we'll have bragging rights. I said we're making, this recipe shows you how to make 2 different kinds of cheese. It's kind of like 3, because if you take it off at 175 and add the acid, it's going to be the loose curd ricotta. If you go up a little bit to 180, you're going to be able to mold the ricotta and have these cute little molds that you can put raspberries or mint jelly on top, and a little piece of mint to decorate. Won't your friends be impressed? Okay, we're up to 175, okay? This is where we would add the acid if we were making what? The ricotta cheese, exactly. But just to be a little different and try something new, we're going to take it on up to 185 to make the paneer cheese. And I am being a little more cautious now to make sure I cover the entire bottom of the pan, because it's getting hot. Be careful that it's not sticking. It's not sticking so far. Okay, I think we're about there. Let's check our temperature. 186, so let's turn it off. And you're gonna ask, does that 1 degree make a lot of difference? No. But we're ready to add our acid. We're turning our heat off, and you wanna add your acid slowly. If you'll notice, I haven't told you how much acid, because they don't tell you. Again, we're going to use our senses. So as soon as this starts to separate the protein from the whey, we'll know, okay? So we're gonna add a little bit. Let's see what happens. We'll add a little more. I start out with about a cup for a half a gallon. It's starting to change in consistency. I don't know if you can see that or not. Now, if I have a cup of the fresh lemon juice here, and that doesn't enough, then I will go to the concentrate. But can you see that? I hope you can see that. Look, it's separating. The protein is a little white, okay? And the whey is kind of translucent. I'm going to just a tad more because I think that will be enough. And I'll give you an idea of what the curds look like. Can you see that? Okay. Now we're going to let it sit for 10 minutes. Can you see how that's getting stuck in my spatula? I still like this spatula to work with, but can you imagine if that was gauze, how much it would be? I'm not going to stir anymore because I don't want to lose that fat. I want that fat to stay in with the protein. And the more I stir, I think it's pretty translucent enough. I hope y'all can see that. It has a yellowish tinge. Actually, that yellowish tinge is the riboflavin and thiamine, the B vitamins that are in there. But I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. And you can leave it like 10 to 15 minutes. You have to, and that's the part I have a problem with, is experimenting. I want a surefire way that's going to work for me. I don't want to have to work with guessing that first time. I want it to be perfect the very first time, okay? I don't want to have to experiment. So move this over here so you can still see how that is all taking place. And actually, I'm going to scoot it over just a little. I don't know if I can get both of them in the overhead camera or not. Maybe part of it. And during this 10 minutes is when I get my cheesecloth ready. So what I have here is just a bowl, okay? You can use a pan, you can use whatever, enough that it's something that's going to catch some of this whey that's going to drain through. And then I'm going to take my cheesecloth and drape it over top of, this pan's a little hot, don't want to burn myself. Okay, we're going to drape that over top of our colander, kind of equal. And I'll show you something fun we'll do with that in just a little bit. And then we'll be putting the curds from here over into here and let them drain. After they're drained is when we'll put our seasonings in. Because I know some of you are saying, you still haven't put that salt in. Well, trust me, the first time I made this, I didn't put any salt in because I did forget it. And the seasoning is the part that I'm still struggling with and still experimenting with. I don't seem to be able to get enough salt in it to give it the flavor I want. But then when you start thinking about, a lot of cheeses don't have much flavor except for what's put on top of them. Ricotta cheese is good because it's so creamy and you can stuff shells with it and you can put it in lasagna. It's creamy consistency. But to eat ricotta, it doesn't have a whole lot of flavor to it. So I think that was the part I was kind of surprised with my finished product. But I am learning as I go, and I hope you'll join me on this process, and I hope you'll share your information with me. I'll bet there's people out there watching this right now that's made cheese many more times than Kay has. So if you would share your information, I would be tickled to hear what your successes and your not such successes. We don't call them failures because we learn from all of it, correct? I got 2 more minutes here, and I want to take this opportunity to mention a lady that I used quite a bit in reference, everything from her books to her YouTubes to whatever, and it's Gianna Cleese Caldwell. She is a dairy farmer, and she makes yogurt, she makes cheeses, and she's very real world. I mean, she's very practical. She talks about making hard cheese. It takes a press, and she doesn't have a 20-pound press, so she uses the ratchet straps that her husband has, I mean, she is really informative. I learned a lot of skills from her, and she is the one that taught me about the type of knot that we're going to use here in just a moment to tie this up. So now this has cooled off a little bit. There's still not as much steam is coming from it as it was when I first started the timer. And let's look and see what we got in the way of curds. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So our next step in order to drain these curds, drain the whey away, is we're gonna put it in, and I hope you can see that because I'm trying to show, you've already seen the curds and whey. I'm gonna move it over a little. I really want to concentrate on the cheesecloth so you can see what's taking place here. Because this does look very similar to ricotta cheese. We took it a little bit farther. If you were here, I'd give you a test right now. What temperature should I have stopped if I was making ricotta cheese? And that's when all my great students would say 175 degrees. You're right, Fahrenheit. So we're gonna lift all of this out and let it sit in the cheesecloth. Now, there's different opinions on what I'm doing right now. Some people say, why don't you just pour it in there? Part of the reason is we're trying to get the moisture out. We're trying to get the whey out. So let's get as much out as we can here before we put it over here to drain. This is kind of cool. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but when I made it at home, I didn't use a stainless steel bowl. And I can hear all that whey just dripping down in there. See how it's sticking in the holes? That's what would happen if we use gauze. Now, I'm saying that, and some of you may make cheese and you use gauze and you're very successful with it, but I wasn't. Cheesecloth's best for me. As soon as I get all of this or enough dipped up that I can show you the next step of the process, that's when we would add our seasonings. We'll add our salt. I'm gonna add a half a teaspoon of salt to this. Be quite honest, I might put a little bit more. Half a teaspoon has not been quite enough for me. And who am I making this cheese for? Me. Okay. Let's see if I can lift the cheesecloth up and show you guys how it's running through. In the overhead, maybe you can see what's in the bottom. You'll see that way is much more clear, more translucent, it's not clear, than what was in the pan. But it is doing a good job of separating the moisture here. It needs to sit here for about 5 minutes because there's still some moisture, very little. Let me try. Look at that. Oh, doesn't that look good? It's so creamy. I need you all as my audience all the time because I believe this is the creamiest I've made. I am going to go ahead and add my half a teaspoon of salt. It doesn't have to be level. I'm not going to level mine because I told you that wasn't enough for me. We're going to sprinkle that over our curds. And then take our spatula or spoon or whatever you choose to use and just stir it a little bit so that we have the salt throughout. And the spatula may not have been the best thing to use for demo purposes because I don't know if you can see the cheese. Oh, doesn't that look good? Can you tell I'm proud of myself? Every time I make it, I think, oh, I didn't think I could make cheese. After it has set for 5 minutes, okay, and the only reason we're letting it set for 5 minutes, the more moisture we can get out of this, the better. The more solid it's going to be, and the creamier it's going to be. And it's been about 5 minutes. I didn't set the timer this time, but we fast forwarded a little. But we're going to tie what's called a stilt knot. Okay, there's a Stilton cheese. The Stilton, it's Stilton. I'm right, Stilton knot. And the beauty of the Stilton knot, I don't know the best place to show you this, is that you don't need anything to hold it. In other words, once we get this on here, we don't need a rubber band, we don't need any kind of clip. You take 3 corners of your cheesecloth, okay? 3 corners, and you've got a 4th one left here, okay? These 3, we're gonna get as close down to the cheese as we possibly can. And then this one, the 4th one, let me push this over so you can see what I'm doing. The 4th one, we take and wrap around the bundle. I don't know if that's a proper term or not, but you wrap it all the way around. And then as you go around for your second time, you go underneath what you just, the first one. Let me see if I can show it over top. See how there? And now the next one, I'm gonna go under that one. And when I do that, it pulls it tighter to the cheese, the actual product. And every time I go under until I run out of cheesecloth. I hope this is probably, and see how it's gonna stay? It stays because it's underneath there, okay? So at this point, we've got a pot of cheese or a bag of cheese or whatever you wanna refer to it as. We're gonna press it a little bit. So let's take and what I'm using to do the pressing is just a little skillet. You can use a little bowl, you can use whatever. I take a plate, I turned upside down inside it. Then I'm gonna set my pod on top of it, take my knot and kind of spread it out a little bit to make it sit a little more level. And then we're gonna set something on top of it. This is where you have to become creative because I'm gonna set a bowl on top of it, but that bowl in itself will not be enough. You're gonna put some weights in it. This is when you go to the pantry, or hopefully you went earlier and had it sitting here ready for you, and put some weight. Now it doesn't have to be a huge amount of weight, but you're gonna put something on the top there to put pressure down on your cheese to squeeze even more moisture out. That's why you had to have this, I'm using a skillet, you had to have a bowl or something to catch the extra weight that you're gonna get out there. I also had, it is wobbly in the very beginning. After it starts setting up for a little bit, it will sit on its own. I don't know that, okay? Very creative. Yeah, I just happen to have that fancy gravy I made for Thanksgiving, bottles of that and sitting there. It would be better if the pot that I used here, it could attach to it a little more and have a little bit more steadiness. Another thing I did at home, the first time I did this, I used cans, okay? Just 14-ounce cans. And I leaned this up against the wall so that I could set this up against the wall and it's not gonna fall over, but it would still continue to put the weight on it. But we're gonna do that for 45 minutes. After you get finished, we'll see what happens here in a little bit, but after we get finished, you can see here with the cheese here, I don't know if I can handle both at the same time or not. Our cheese has a little belly, call it a belly button, okay? That's where that knot went into it. And that's the Stilt Knot. This cheese here, I don't know if you can tell, has basil in it. I did a little experimenting with that because, and had some basil. So we will fast forward 45 minutes and then check our cheese and see what we've got, okay? Okay, we have a minute and a half left before we can look at our finished product. But in that minute and a half, I'm gonna talk to you just a little bit about, first of all, I want you to see our weighted cheese back here. I did prop it up against the wall. So if it started to get wobbly, which it's not now, okay, because it's had time to set up and solidify, but I put it up against the wall so that I didn't have to stand there and hold it as long. I also want to show you, and my overhead phone battery is gone, so I'm going to try to show this to you on the iPad. So let me go around to the front of the table here, and let me share with you this is the cheese with the basil that I was showing you earlier. You can see the little belly button indentation. Actually, the glare you probably can't. And then this was the very first one I made, and you can see the consistency of the cheese on the inside. Maybe if I bring it a little closer and we can slice it. And then let's look at the basil a little closer. Oh, there we go. See the basil, the cheese, and the belly button. Okay, you probably heard my timer go off too, so that means 45 minutes are up. Let's take our fancy mold here and take our weight off. And there you can see we've got our cheese pod right here. I'm gonna unwrap it. I can find the end of our Stilt Knot. There it is. So I'm gonna unwrap it and see what we've got here. Oh, look at the cheese. I'll use this as a plate here so I can do a little bit better job with it. And we've got cheese. We made cheese. We got the indentation of the plate, but that's decoration, right? If you'll notice on the other side, the knot, the little belly button is a little crumbly. That probably means that I probably should have let it drain a little bit longer before I tried it. I rushed it a little bit for the demo, but we can still plate this on a cheese board or saucer. And take our crackers from here and put around it. And look what we've done. Look at that. I'm proud every time it turns out. I hope you are too, okay? I will tell you, it's better at this point if you refrigerate it overnight, because it does a little bit of that crumbly texture that's on top will go away. It's okay right now, but in order to refrigerate it overnight, you need to put it in an airtight container, okay? And then place it in the refrigerator, and we are going to try some. We're going to fry some up here in a few minutes to see what it tastes like. The paneer cheese tastes like when it's cooked. and see that it doesn't melt. So that's not on the demo. Those people that joined us for the watch party are going to get to do that. So maybe next time you'll join us and maybe we'll have something other fun to do. I want to tell you one more thing about the cheesecloth, because there was a question during that time. I bought a little bundle of it because I do plan on making cheese again. But you can buy just a yard, and that's enough probably to make 4 cheeses of a half gallon each time. So until next time, I have really enjoyed learning to make cheese with you and others, and I hope you learned just as much as I did.